Hey, everybody. How are you? Did you miss us? We've been gone a week. I'm with Father Lowe from Jacksonville, St. John the Divine. He had a clergy meeting, correct, Father?
We were out of town.
And that's where they get, is it all the priests from America or just some?
All the Greek
Cool.
Orthodox clergy, all the Greek Orthodox clergy in America. We meet this particular year. We met in Phoenix, so that was really nice to just experience. Just being together with. I mean, you have so many fond memories of being with your classmates at seminary. In some ways, it's like a reunion, like a college reunion. But we also just spend time, obviously, in prayer, and then just connecting with one another and learning and getting new ideas for ministry and just kind of collaborating. It's a great opportunity for us.
You know, the a couple of days before that, I was emceeing Bishop Gerasimos and the is his and the, I think it was the 100th celebration of the metropolis for the West Coast. And the first thing as I came on stage, I had to say, I'm telling you, sweat epidiphoros. That was not easy, brother. Let me tell
Yes.
you. God,
Was he
all
was
of
he was he in
he
attendance?
he was there. Yeah. He
Oh,
came up stage. He
beautiful.
was very kind, very sweet, and it was they're also honoring Gerasimos, and so it was His Eminence Gerasimos. So, but it wasn't just those. It was so many Greek names.
Oh yeah.
I literally went hoarse the night before going over all the
Those
names.
words with like 10 syllables or
I
something like that.
know. And so, but anyway, we're back. We're talking about Daniel chapter 3. And the first question I had was actually my toughest question. And I was like, I don't know if I should ask him this. I don't know, because it was one of the first things you said. God wants us to praise him. And my question was, I think I know the answer, but I want to get your thoughts on it. Why does God want us to praise him? That was a big question for me.
Because it's not that word praise, especially in the English language, kind of gets lost a little bit. But with because we kind of think that God, He's God. Why would He need our praise? But it is really acknowledging who He is in our life. When we
Interesting.
praise something, we say that whatever we're praising, and I argue this in the sermon, that all of us are praising something in our life. We would love to say it's Christ, but sometimes we praise things that are not God. We praise money, power, pride. Sometimes we praise things that we do that are what the Bible calls our persistent struggles, our persistent sins, and be unforgiveness. But praise, in the sense with God, one of the ways that we define that is us acknowledging who God is in our life.
Interesting. So it's really it's the word praise means just acknowledging, showing that Christ is the center of our life.
The word praise and worship, actually, in one of the translations from the Greek language, it means something that you would continuously kiss with so much love, like your entire being. You know, when you, it denotes a level of just mere affection, mere love, like this love that I have. So when we talk about praise and worshiping, it means that in as we would see in a kiss, in a way of loving something so dramatically, is the way God yearns for us to show that who He is in our life. He knows who He is. He doesn't need us. He's not waiting there, going, okay, well, come on, everyone, praise me. But it is us saying, God, I love you with every ounce from my head to my toe. Like, I'm praising you and I'm giving you all the glory that you deserve. And so praise is that way. Praise is not limited to just our mouth. It's our hands, it's our eyes, it's our heart, it's our mind. It's giving God, hey, God, you have everything. I'm praising you with all of it, giving you everything that's already yours. I'm simply returning it back to you.
I think in here's how I had it in my head. In doing that, I think Christ knows in doing that, it centers our lives and gives us the best shot at having the best life that
Mhm.
we can have for ourselves. He knows if you are in line with him, then your life will be at its best.
Mhm.
Correct?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, it's like, you've been at the beach before, and you're at the beach, and um, if you remember when you were growing up, you're out at the beach, and you know where your mom and dad are at. They're sitting on the in the sand, and then you kind of are swimming, having a good old time. But after a while, you look back, and the current has taken you away.
Right, right.
Praise is what gets you back into
Got it.
alignment. Yeah.
Well said. Well said. And this one, I think I may have heard this before, but boy, I didn't quite know this. That was Lucifer's primary purpose, was to give God adoration.
Well,
So let me
Lucifer,
let me
yeah,
let me set this up for everybody.
yeah.
At one point, Lucifer was an angel in heaven.
Mhm.
Most people, I think, know that, and then you can take it from there.
Yeah, so I mean, in the traditions of the scriptures, and I simply was just kind of quoting the traditions within the scripture itself, but that we understood that Lucifer was an angel whose primary purpose was to praise God. I mean, that's the job of the angels. We hear about that in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, where we kind of get a little bit of a window, if you will, into the role, if you will, of the job of the angels, and they're in this constant praise. That's where we hear that phrase, holy, holy, holy Lord God at Sabaoth. What we would say sometimes for us as Orthodox, what we'd be saying during the divine liturgy, where we say, holy God, holy mighty, holy. We are, in some small way, I'm not saying this is the total meaning of it, but in some small way, we are acknowledging we're praising God, we're doing just like the angels were doing. And here, Lucifer, basically what we hear in the scriptures, was jealous. He did not want the adoration to be given to God, but rather to himself. And so in some parts of scripture, some have argued, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but that he was able to convince other angels to follow along with him. And so we need to recognize that, whether or not we want to acknowledge, like I tell people all the time, and you probably heard me say this on the show, is that whether or not we want to believe that the devil exists doesn't really matter, because like I tell people, whether you believe in him or not doesn't make him go away. The greatest lie that the devil has ever convinced us is that he doesn't exist.
Right.
And for many of us, that's how we operate. And when you translate that, Bob, into what we're seeing in the world today, and obviously the book of Daniel is a prime example of that. I think it's one of the best books in the Bible that speaks about a shifting culture where we're shifting. We're losing our way, just like being on the ocean and getting drifted away by the current of the world. That's the same thing that's happening to the people in the book of Daniel. And I would argue in what we're seeing in our world today.
And you mentioned that in the book, or at that time, that the people had been warned time and time again that to follow God, but they didn't, and they were drifting away. And I think you said it was after they had gone through the Red Sea.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily in that particular chapter or that book that we see this, but what one of the major themes of the Old Testament is God promising God makes a promise to all nations, but in this we see the narrative of one of those particular nations, the people of Israel, the Hebrew people. And when he throughout this, he loves and he expresses his love for them, his compassion, his caring. He frees them, as you talked about earlier, from Pharaoh by crossing through the Red Sea. And in other parts of the Bible, of the Old Testament, where he delivers them or he protects them, and then they would follow him for some time, but then they would be led astray either by their own following of other gods with a little g, and God would send prophets to basically warn them, hey, listen, get back on track. The book of Daniel, it's 12 chapters. The first 6 chapters are historical. The second 6 chapters, the second half of that book, is very much prophetic. And so Daniel is considered one of the prophecies, one of the book of the prophecies of the prophets. But my point being with this is that God warns the people over and over again to stay close to them. And at times they do, and then they would fall back, and then he'd send a prophet again. In this case, God keeps warning the people, and he tells them that if they don't stay close to him, that they're going to be conquered, that another civilization is going to conquer them. And in this case, the people of Babylon, with the king name, many of us know this, Nebuchadnezzar. He is the king there, ends up conquering the people, conquering Jerusalem, and taking as all of his slaves, in some ways a repeat story of what happened with Pharaoh, taking all of these people as his slaves in Babylon, which is present-day Iraq, where it was a pagan empire. At that time, there wasn't Islam. There was just simply a pagan empire that was sheerly focused on our own needs. In fact, the word Babylon was basically one of the definitions, not the definition, but one of the definitions is that it's the gate of the gods.
Right.
And so in this particular story that we see in Daniel chapter 3 is where Nebuchadnezzar, as you were just putting on the screen, is basically he builds this gold monument, which is basically is 90 feet high and 90 feet thick of gold, and he requires
90 feet thick.
No, 90 feet high and 9 feet thick.
9 feet thick. Got it.
Yeah. So, and that's what they generally believe that to be. It may be a little bit off, but the point being is that there was this magnificent, massive object that Nebuchadnezzar, because it was a pagan empire, he had tremendous power. He was considered as a deity himself. He was they were considered them like little gods. So that he forced everyone to bow down and worship. And as I shared in that sermon, and I really kind of move a little bit from the historical to the reality of today, is that I always ask people to ask themselves, what are you bowing down to? Because you can always, one of the ways that you know what you're bowing down to is what you spend the most time with. So sometimes for many of us, maybe right now, what we're seeing in the world, we're bowing down to worry or bowing down to fears. Sometimes we can bow down to, and again, as I mentioned earlier, it could be money. It could be what's on my 401k. It could be bowing down, dare I say, politics or news. And you can always tell, typically, not always, but typically you can tell by how much time you spend with that. So I tease my community sometimes, especially in Bible study, not during a sermon, but I said, if you know more about Donald Trump than you know about St. Paul, well, then that just tells you where you're spending your time. If you know more about Joe Biden or whoever it is, I mean, you pick the person. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Then you know about the St. George or St. Basil. Then you ask yourself, okay, well, what am I bowing down to? Because we would love, all of us, Bob, to say that we bow down to Christ. I mean, we would love to say that. But that's just not the reality. And what God warns us is he says, when you bow down to other gods, they will lead you astray. In other words, that's why that whole first sermon that Jesus preaches, and not to sound preachy, I don't want to sound this way, so I want this to be a conversation, but I'm just very passionate about it. But the very first sermon that Jesus preaches, repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. In other words, repent because the king is here. That was, in other words, the kingdom is at hand. And what does the thief on the cross say? He says, remember me in your kingdom. In other words, he recognized that Jesus Christ was the king. And we even say in our liturgy, come, let us worship and bow down to our King and our God. We talk about Christ being the King of glory, but we don't oftentimes show it. In other words, we call him that. We just haven't crowned him in our life to be just that.
Great point. Because I thought it was, you're going to say, what do people spend time on? I thought you were going to say money, whatever, which I guess those could be, but it's really your time. Is that, and that is a great thought, that is really well said, Father. As we get into the story, I thought this was interesting that the story about to talk about is read during Holy Week, at one of the most pivotal moments of Holy Week or of the whole calendar, correct?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for reminding me about that. I mean, so during the Orthodox Holy Week, Holy Saturday morning is they're all beautiful services, obviously, but there's just this beauty of Holy Saturday morning where, there's this victorious proclamation that's being said that the tomb is empty. This proclamation that the angel gives to the myrrh-bearing women that he's no longer here. And there's this triumphant, message. And there's a lot of times there's these leaves that are thrown in the air as a sign of victory. Sometimes people make a lot of noise in there as this destruction of Hades is happening. But the reading that is done that morning, it's only done that day on this one of the highest days of the entire year. Some would argue it is the highest day of the entire year, is the reading of the book of Daniel, chapter 3 of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, along with Daniel, and hearing about this in this, the three youths specifically being in this fiery furnace because they did not bow down to the God that Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to bow down to.
So by the way, So I have not been to the Saturday morning service, but every year I say to my wife, because when you come into the church after that service, it's flooded with flowers. And my father-in-law would tell me, he says, Bob, you gotta, and so every year I go, oh, we gotta go to this because they do have the bells and the thing, and it's great. And this year I've got to go to, because when you come in and you see these flowers everywhere, it's just, it gives you the chills, you
Yeah,
know?
it's the garden of this paradise that we try to, in some small way, to emulate and to reveal. But that service is just, it's a beautiful service, and this reading is there. In fact, the entire reading takes place of this chapter 3, is mentioned, and I love it because it talks about, okay, on Holy Saturday we're being told, listen, there is the God, and that's the God, that the King of Glory, Jesus Christ. But it's also, but it's showing us, how do we stand firm in a world that's telling us to bow down to it?
Right, right,
You
right.
know,
So along those lines, these three servants, Nebuchadnezzar was saying, and if I'm correct, these were three of the more influential servants.
exactly. Yeah, we hear about that in chapter 1. Yes, these were the
Right.
ones. Yes.
And he's telling them, I want you to bow down. They refuse to, and then take it from there. Go ahead, take it from there. And what I think the point being that there was a blazing furnace that was set up.
Yeah, I mean,
Correct.
they basically, King Nebuchadnezzar requires everyone to bow down, and all of the people do, including the Jewish, the Hebrew people that were there, with the exception of these three youth who refused to bow down. And it's amazing, uh, what they say. I'll read to you a little bit. They just say, it says, King, this is them speaking. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. For if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from the majesty's hand. But then check this out, Bob. It says, but even if he doesn't, we want you to know, that your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of God you have set up. Now keep in mind, these are teenagers.
Right.
There's teenage people who are totally standing up at a time when everyone else is kneeling down. And I think one of the messages that we really want to talk about is asking yourself, what am I bowing down to? What have I put on the throne in my life that God would say does not belong there? That only
Yeah.
I belong there? Because every one of us do, and we do it every day. I mean, so again, it's just studying yourself to see what's been on the throne today. I can tell you, for me today, I probably spend a little bit too much time just being totally vulnerable, right now, and just being transparent. It's just in a tremendous amount of worry, and fear for certain people that are, certain families that are in my church that are going through difficult times. And if I'm not careful, I can allow that fear and that worry to speak so powerfully in my own personal life that it impacts me physically and emotionally. And so that's why there's this, that we need to find these little interruptive moments, and this show hopefully is one of them, where we just simply say, who's sitting in God's chair? Like, who's trying to be the king of my life? Because just like Lucifer, he wants that adoration on himself. He wants you to be thinking only about yourself, because that's all he thought about in himself.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment you made. In other words, something that we would consider to be commendable. You're worrying about somebody. You're praying for that. But you're saying even that can put you in the wrong position, correct?
Right, because worry on its own has a cascading effect. So worry impacts us on a number of levels. It impacts our personality. It impacts our physical health, our fatigue. It impacts our spiritual health. Always know that most of the emotions, if they're not anchored correctly, in any emotion, by the way, if they're not anchored correctly, they could be, no matter how noble you think they are, when people say, I'm
Right.
just so worried about this person, I'm just so afraid. Well, yes, we understand that could be perceived as noble, but the problem with that is that it's impacting you in ways that you have no idea about. and that will cascade, whether in that moment or in an hour or 2 hours or in a couple of days from them, into other facets of your life. And so that's why for me, just being, as I was sharing, just in a vulnerable way, is that I need to hear myself say, "Hey, Nick, who's being the king now?" Because there's no new problems for God. Like he's seen it all. So as soon as I can take that and remind myself, who is the king? Like I need to put it in his hands. Like that's,
Right.
so yeah.
Well said. I've recently, along with what we've talked about, things we've talked about, things I've read in your book, Renewing You, um, there have been times when a significant problem has come up, and I've looked at it and I said, okay, I'm going to try something. I'm just not going to worry about it, period.
Hmm.
I have to tell you, it was torture, but it all worked out. And I was amazed at how it worked out. But from the moment that problem came in, because usually it would keep me up at night and I'd wake up and I'd think about it. But I think you're right. But it's like developing a new muscle in that respect. It takes time, it takes repetition, it takes growth, it takes stretching, all of that. So
And that's
it's
one of the things why we not to interrupt you. I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead, Bob. Go ahead.
no, good. Finish,
No,
Bob.
I think that's one of the reasons why we have these prayer robes that kind of keep us like focused. Because left on our own, I mean, I say this in a very respectful way to people within my parish, and I say this to myself. We are the last people that we need to be trusting to navigate our life. Like we need to be. I mean, because our track record shows what we end up doing.
Right.
We need. That's why we need Christ. And as we've shared on the show, I think a couple months back when we were talking about, this whole adage that God doesn't give us more than we can handle. The reality is that yes, God does give us more than we can handle, so that we need to depend on Him more.
Yeah.
You know.
So true. Speaking of which, when for those who don't know, my wife and I, we have triplets. And when at 14 weeks, I spoke about this the other night when at that function, at 14 weeks, my wife essentially went into labor.
Mm-hmm.
And they were telling us to abort 2 of the kids and he said, I'm not even worried about the 3 of them dying. He goes, what I'm worried about is you're going to have 3 invalids.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, your lives will come to an abrupt halt. And what happened was, being a type A, I guess I am a type A, Greek, whatever, I've always been able to work my way, work harder, figure it out, this and that. But God puts you in a position where he says, no matter how late you stay up, no matter how hard you work, no matter what you think, what you read, what you do, you can't get out of this without me.
Right.
And I'm the only, and when this comes through, you will know it's because of me. And he makes it clear. He made it clear in my mind. That icon's right there. And I have many a day and started many a day saying, I owe you my life, because he made it clear.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I'll take care of it. But it takes repetition.
Right. Well, and that's why, we talked about a couple of weeks back, when we were talking about just the power of our thoughts. And, we have 80,000 to 120,000 thoughts that happen every day. If there's only 86,400 seconds in a day, I mean, that's including when we're sleeping. How could we possibly be able to, realize just the sheer impact of how faulty thinking impacts us? And that's why, as you were beautifully saying, we create these neural pathways, these neural highways, if you will, or default settings, as we like to call them, where we're just so used to that this is what we tend to do. And it's just changing it. It's just changing and saying, you know what, I need less of me and more of him. I love the way John the Baptist says, I decrease so that you can increase, referring to Christ. So let me decrease these thoughts, decrease these worries, decrease whatever I'm putting on as the king, and elevate the true king. And it's hard. That's why
very hard.
We tell people Christianity is not a cruise ship, it's a battleship.
I love that one.
Yeah.
The fire was so hot, the guards died.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you start studying how in this particular chapter, it's kind of funny that basically Nebuchadnezzar gets so upset, he gets so angry that he because they refuse to bow down to him, that he lights the furnace on fire. And then when he sees that it's not working, he tells his guards to make the fire even hotter. Well, as those guards are making it hotter, they bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And as they're binding them and putting them into this fire, they themselves die because the heat is so great. And so it's one of those things where, you can just show the sheer insanity, if you will, of Nebuchadnezzar. And I would argue the sheer insanity of the enemy, of the devil, that he will keep doing sometimes the silliest things because he doesn't have any new ideas. He just does the same things that whatever we struggle with, our biggest struggle, he will keep using that as the anchor that he will use to attack us from different directions. So he'll come into the house of those struggles in different from different areas, whether it be the window, the door, whatever, because he doesn't have new ideas. He just knows how to go after that one area. So it just was. I think it's just not necessarily funny, but it's just interesting that he thought that by raising the temperature that they would suffer more. And to be quite honest with you, if you wanted them to suffer, you would let the temperature go lower, so that it would be a much more prolonged death, not a short death.
Right.
But,
and as they're thrown into the fire, we see 4 people are in the fire, this is one of my favorite parts of this story. And you alluded to it when you were talking your sermon, which I always use this as kind of a metaphor in my mind, which is whatever we're going through, Christ is in the fire with us.
That's right.
So explain what happened in that moment.
Well, I mean, basically, in the book of Daniel, it says this. I'll read it to you. It says, Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we saw tied up and thrown in the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." And then he says, "But look, I see 4 men walking in the fire, unbound, they're unharmed, and the 4th looks like the son of the gods." So I love this too, Bob, because for a number of reasons, much of what you just mentioned there, but just this idea that God reveals himself even to people that are not even believers, and he will at times will reveal himself in ways to create opportunities for us to share him with people. And so here these 3 youth are in this blazing furnace so hot that it's killing the guards, and they see these 4 people unharmed. They're totally comfortable, they're totally fine. And that 4th person, we understand that in the tradition of the church, is that being that of Christ. I mean, so yes, I mean, although we can feel, and that's what one of the unhealthy habits of faulty thinking is that whenever we're facing a difficulty or a challenge, Bob, many times we can feel like we're alone, or if it's a family thing, that our family is alone. And what God is teaching us even through this is that one of the thesis statements, if you will, of this sermon was that the fire in you is greater than any furnace that's before you.
Interesting.
The fire of Christ in you is greater than any furnace that you could be facing outside of you.
You mentioned something, and I didn't know this, that in my family, actually, our house, when I was young, had gotten on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, that smell,
you don't forget
in the wood, it's in the clothes. It is a smell you'll never forget. But tell what you said about yours, and then what happened here.
I mean, so our house caught on fire. Florida is known for lightning strikes, and our house was struck by lightning back in 2011. In fact, several houses in our neighborhood were struck by lightning. And most of our house was burned down, and it was a very difficult time for us for a number of levels. We had young children, not being in the house, having to wait for it to be rebuilt. Nothing compared to what the real problems that the real world is dealing with. But at that time, it was a difficulty for us. But I love that in this book of Daniel, this chapter, it makes a statement about this. It says that when they pulled when Nebuchadnezzar had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out, they came out and they didn't even have the stench or the smell of smoke. I mean, you and I can't go in front of a campfire without smelling like smoke that would last for, even after we wash the clothes. It was so important that the author of this book, Daniel, felt like it was so important to put in there that even the smell of smoke wasn't even on them. That's how God delivered them from that. And it just was a beautiful imagery that the author really wanted to make sure that they conveyed to us, that when we're with God, that when we bow down to worship him,
So I thought this was such a great lead into all of this, to what you segued into, which is how do we bow down to the right God? And the first one was conviction over compromise.
Right. So conviction over compromise. What I tell people is all of us have to be convicted about something. I would argue that we need to be convicted about Christ. When I mean convicted, it means a conviction is a belief. It is something that at your core that this is what it is. So in order for us to be convicted on certain things, we have to evict things that are keeping it from us. So going back to what we were mentioning earlier, if I want Christ to truly be the king over my life, I've got to take away the crowns that I've given to other parts of my life. You know what I'm saying? So if I've been given the crowns to something else other than Christ, conviction over compromise means I need to know that if I want to get through my life and if I want to be able to deal with a culture that's shifting, I need to be so convicted into Christ. In the book of Joshua, it says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." It's a convicted statement. It's a statement with tremendous conviction. So there's no ambiguity about what they're doing. It's not like we're going to be worshiping God Sundays only or once in a while during the week. It's like we will serve the Lord. That's the kind of conviction that what I'm talking about today is that we have to have a conviction in that Christ is the king over our life. And the question we have to ask ourselves is who have we given the crowns to? Who is the and I would argue that a lot of times when you want to look at what you're convicted with, it starts with your own thoughts. Like our thoughts, we talked about this a couple weeks back, but our thoughts, just as a reminder for our audience, shapes our life. So said simply, our beliefs shape our behaviors. I love what St. Paisios, I wrote it down for us today, and he says this. He says, thoughts are like airplanes that are flying in the air. If you ignore them, there's no problem. But if you pay attention to them, you create an airport inside of your head and permit them to land.
That's great. I love that one.
So yeah. So here, the question is what are you allowing in your life what are you allowing to have as the runway in your own mind? What's landing in your runway? And for a lot of us, it could be a lot. It could be a whole bunch of different things. So I guess the very first thing that I would say is conviction means I want to be convicted on something. Like I want to convict my life to be serving you, Christ, to serve you, that every day I wake up and I give you praise. I give you the kind of praise that you deserve, not because you need it, but because it's me expressing to you that faith without works is dead, that me expressing to you that you are the king over my life, that I'm going to bring you when I'm at the grocery store, when I'm at work. I'm going to that in every part of my life, like when people see me, I want them to see you. That's the king, because I'm part of the royal family. You and I are part of the royal family. He's the king, but we're part of his inheritance. We're his children.
There was a great thing that somebody once said, if there was a jury trial, could you be convicted of being a Christian?
I love that. I love that.
Or could you, or could they not prove it?
I love that. That's a beautiful, it's a true statement. And I think all of us, if we're honest, at times we'd be like, no, I don't, I would be convicted. I would be convicted of not being the best version of Christ in me. That's for sure.
I think the second one was confidence over chaos. Did I get it right?
Yep. So typically, if we're looking at these three use of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, once you're convicted with something, in other words, nothing wavers you, that you are convicted in what you believe and how you're going to live your life. Let's be honest. It's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder, because sometimes the people that you had in your life may like the old version of Bob or the old version of Nick. And so often what I was sharing with this is that if conviction deals more with our thoughts and studying our thoughts and reminding ourselves that everything starts here and whatever I'm letting to land is going to stay in my mind, it's going to live, then confidence is all about who is in my life, the people that I choose to have in my life. And so one of the things I share with our church is Shadrach wasn't by himself. He had Meshach and Abednego.
Oh, interesting.
they were together so that they were able to handle that. And sometimes we have friends in our life that when we look at when we take inventory of our friends, there's people that we may say, well, we have a lot of people that, everyone loves me, Father Nick, or I have a lot of friends. There'll be a lot of those friends are your friends as long as you're doing what they want you to do. But the moment that you don't do what they want you to do, then you really know who's your friends. And we've all experienced that when we thought someone was our friend and they really weren't our friend. They were our friend as long as we did what they wanted us to do. Well, those three youths all said, hey, we are all convicted and we are going to be confident in the chaos of that. In other words, that we're going to be confident knowing that we know who we are, but we also recognize that we have people that we're all in this together, and that they had friends that shared that same conviction when they were going through the furnace of life. And so in a very short way, simple way, Bob, I just would share with our listeners what the scriptures say. The scriptures say that bad company corrupts good character. In one area of the Bible, it says, don't cast your pearl amongst the swine. In other words, that's a hard statement to say, but, I tell people, show me your friends, I'll show you your life.
Yeah.
Your salvation is hinged. It's connected to who you have in your life. And don't ever underestimate that power. Emotions are contagious. So if you're around the wrong people, you're going to catch what they're giving out.
Was it in Renewing You, or something we discussed that if you show me your 5 best friends, I can get an idea of exactly who you are?
It's in Renewing You. Yes, we have that. Yes.
Yeah.
It's so, because everything is so, as you know, Bob, it's so relationship based. I mean, you and I have a friendship where we feed each other. I at my core, you feed me. I hope I do the same with you, and obviously to our audience today. But make no mistake, you're either being fed or you're feeding someone. And for a lot of us, we may be feeding, but we're not having people that are feeding us. And Shadrach he wasn't just the only one that was feeding. He was being fed by Meshach and Abednego, and each of them had that same exact experience.
Good point. I think this is what you said, purpose in the furnace. Did I get that right?
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, what I was sharing with that is that, if you read the rest of that chapter, which was extraordinary, is Nebuchadnezzar has a transformational moment, and he talks about how this is what he says. He says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God. Now, listen to that statement alone is him acknowledging that there is a God, not gods, but the Most High God. Come here. And then he goes on. Then it goes on later on to speak about how he makes a decree that everyone should worship their God, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And what I was trying to share with our church family that day is that when you stand up and you're convicted, when you have people in your life that you can be confident with in the chaos, people are watching. And people are watching in the sense that when they watch and they see you walking through that furnace, that it shapes their life, just like how it did Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar turned his entire faith structure and the faith structure of Babylon upside down when he saw what those 3 youths were doing in that furnace. And he issued a decree that people should be praising that God. And so the challenge that we have in our own life is making sure that we, are convicted, because you're convicted about something. Let's just hope let's be convicted about Christ, that we're confident with the people that we have around us that can help lead us there. But also that we know that when that's happening, that even when you feel like you're in the furnace, you will lead people to God by how they see how you live in that furnace and how you acted in that furnace.
It's interesting. I think he was a classmate of his father, Gary Kiriakou.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw him, and we've been friends forever. But somewhat recently we were talking. I think we were having dinner or something, and he said something that I had no clue. He said, when I was a Sunday school teacher at St. Sophia's, and he wasn't a priest back then. I think he was a Sunday school student of my brother's at the time. And he said, I would see you at church, and I would think, oh, that's the guy in XYZ movie, and he's driving a car, and he comes to church, and he goes, that had such a profound influence. I had no clue. I was just, you know, in my 20s trying to figure out where the world was, you know.
Right,
But
right.
it was you know, it gave me a sense of to add one other example. When I was speaking at this event the other day, a young man, I'm going to try and put this on social media. He came up to me. I didn't know who he was. Paniotis was his name. And he'd waited in line. I finally connected. My wife had talked to him first and said, go, you know, when I said hi to him, he said, I just want to let you know I saw your movie. And my dad passed away 4 years ago. I was having trouble getting through it. And I saw your movie and had such a profound effect on me. And you realize at that moment,
Mm,
I think hopefully I didn't come across as a jerk, but you realize that when those people are watching you, and if you come off as a jerk, it's going to have such an influence because I know they say trust the art, not the artist, or you know, trust the message, not the priest, or whatever the case may
mm,
be. But you really, people are watching you in the furnace. You know, I'll give one other example and I'll move on. There were somebody that I had done work with 10, 15 years ago, and we were talking about doing another project. There was three of us, three Greek brothers on the phone. And I said, God, we haven't talked so long, this and that. It was interesting what he said. He said, Bob, in those really difficult moments when we had all these orders and things we had to get out, and it was just chaos. He said, you
mm,
never lost your cool. Now I thought I did. I thought I lost it multiple
mm.
times. I mean, I remember in my head it was chaos, but it was interesting. Of all the things, that's what he remembered. So
Right, right.
that's my little add-on to that point. Um, all great points. You ended it with a story I'd never heard, and I looked it up, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Uh, it was the story of Marina Chapman, the girl with no name. I just, wow. If you want to tell people about that, it was so, I just, brother, where do you come up with this stuff? Like, what are you in the office? And like, where does it come from?
It's you're, you know, you read different, you know, books, and you have, you know, and you're constantly looking for ways to kind of inspire your people, and in ways that, you know. So this particular story of Maria Chapman, I had already heard about. I think it was a couple years ago, and I kind of what I do. I'm kind of silly like this, but I have a file. Like if I was to show you the files, I have files of like for different either emails that maybe people have sent me, because I've got friends now that will be like, "Hey, Father Nick, this is a great story. You should put this in one of your sermons," and I'll just file them away, and then at the appropriate time I would use it. But this particular one I had seen, I think it was on the National Geographic Channel or something. I can't. One of the Discovery Channel, one of those channels had this story on there. But basically, Marina Chapman, when she was a very, very young girl, I think maybe 4 or 6 years old, she was abducted in South America, in Colombia. And when these men abducted her in South America, and they took her into the forest, and according to the book, and her story, her bio, they would do the most horrific things to her at this 4-year-old, and then they would leave her to die out in this forest. And she was crying, obviously bleeding, and you know, very much beaten. And over the next several days, this sounds, you know, odd, you know, to say the least, but because they were so deep in the forest, these monkeys that were living in the forest would come down off of the tree, and they would come to her, and they would kind of like just tap on her, and you know, kind of, because to them she was something different. You know, they'd never seen anything like that. And so she would obviously there was nothing to eat, so she would be hungry, and day after day these monkeys would come down and to have that same thing. They kind of push out her. Keep in mind, she's only about 4 or 5 years old, and eventually they bring down some type of a food for her to eat, and they run away. Well, she ends up by this time following them, and she, over the next 10 to 12 years, would live in the forest with this pride of monkeys. And she'd end up learning how to walk, how to communicate, how to act like them. I'm not too sure how well their communication was, but I mean, as far as just her ability to be just like them. And what she shares in the book, The Girl with No Name, is that one day she's up in the tree, and she looks on, she sees something shiny on the ground, and so she's intrigued by it, goes down the tree and picks up this little thing, that this shiny object, but kind of gets scared by it because she'd never seen anything like that. So she just tosses it off to the side. Then she goes back up the tree. The following day, she still sees that. She's enamored by it now. She goes down the tree again. This time when she picks it up, she holds it up to her just like this. And as she's looking at it, she sees two eyes, and she begins to cry. She begins to cry because she recognizes that what she sees in this shiny object is herself. She's looking at a mirror of herself, and that the eyes that she was looking at was her own eyes. And when she was able to look at her eyes, she recognized that she was different than the monkeys. She was different than what was her setting, what was her surrounding. And what I was maintaining in this sermon is that you and I are in this world, but we're not of this world. And my encouragement for them and for all of us is to remember that you're different. That when you're a person of faith, when you're a Christian, you're called to not be part of a culture. You're called to influence that culture. You're called to shape that culture. And you can only do that when you're convicted, when you're confident, and you recognize that there's a purpose behind it, that you have a purpose in this world. Because if not, like I was saying, then the furnace that's outside of you will impact the fire on the inside of you. And
that was such a great story. I was curious, did she ever become a person of faith, or was that just?
I don't know. That's a good question. I never researched that part of it. I just found the story so fascinating that I was like, wow, And in the book of James, it talks about this beautiful imagery of a mirror as well. It says that we stand before a mirror within our relationship with Christ, but then when we walk away, we forget what we look like. And I love that imagery of the mirror that's found in the book of James.
Okay. My I had so many bonus questions today. Oh, I had so many. All right. I
hope and pray that these are like low ball questions, because today is just one of those days that there's not much gray matter up here anymore today, Bob. It's kind of like a little
this is an easy one. Now, okay, I'm going to set it up and then I'm going to ask the question. So I was at this thing and I met this man. He was I think he is the president of Hellenic College or Holy Cross. I can't remember which, but Hellenic College, I think George was his first name. So we're talking and I got on one of my rants and I said, George, the church has got to do a better job of preparing the priests for what is one of the main parts of liturgy, which is the sermon. They're just not, at so many of the churches I've been to, they're just winging it, and they come out for a minute, 2 minutes. And then I see some of the well-known pastors in America, and they understand this is a big part of what people are yearning for. So he turns to me and he goes, we're working on it. He goes, there's this priest, his name's Father Lowe. I know. God. Now listen, wait, I know. I said, that's the guy. That's the guy I'm trying to get them all to see and be like. So here's my question. Is which part of your education, you clearly have a deep recollection, understanding, and depth of knowledge of the Bible. Which part of your education had the greatest impact on it? Was it when you were for your first couple of years? Was it the extended education, which I know you have? And if you can't, because I tell us you had an extended education, or was it in your private time later on? Which part had the greatest part?
If I'm just to really speak totally honestly and not under any type of false, piety. I mean, I will tell you, sincerely, Bob, I feel like I'm in catechism. I'm still learning about our faith, and I find that every single day, just going back to what Aristotle once said, the more I learn, the more I know that I don't know anything at all. And so, the gift that it is a absolute 100% gift that God has given me, the ability to convey a message that I hope is in a way that everyone can understand. So all the glory be to him, because growing up, I had a stuttering problem. I wasn't the smartest kid. I was, things didn't come easy to me. So if your audience today, the Nick Lowe of fifth, sixth grade, third, fourth, fifth grade, they'd
Oh,
go,
you and me both, brother.
yeah,
You and
I
me
mean,
both. Trust me. You
yeah,
don't want to see pictures of me back in third
yeah,
grade.
yeah, I mean, the pictures were the best part. The content of what was in here was just, it just wasn't, I wasn't that, I just had a lot of struggles. I mean, just low self-esteem, inability to really read well. So I would tell you that at the seminary at Holy Cross, what I loved about that time there was obviously what I'm learning. I mean, I'm learning. It's like opening up a treasure box of the Orthodox Church. And if you're listening today and you're not part of the Orthodox Church, there's no strings attached. But I just would encourage you that if you want to just explore a different part of Christianity that you may not be too familiar with, research the Orthodox Church. I mean, there are articles being written now in the Wall Street Journal and other newspapers about how there are so many people coming into the churches that are exploring this church. So just encourage you, but again, no strings attached. If there's no one's going to come knocking at your door, calling you, tell you to come to the church. But I do encourage you to do that. But my time at the seminary was so beneficial to me. And I've shared this actually at the seminary before, is that I learned our faith, I learned how to stay thirsty for my faith, and I'm still obviously learning about my faith. But my ability to communicate it started at my time at Gordon Conwell, at a school that was established by Billy Graham, the great pastor, oftentimes called the chaplain of America, Billy Graham. And like anything that you do, giving messages and giving sermons, it requires work. I mean, just like you, Bob. I mean, not that we're acting. This is not an acting kind of a role, but it's still you realize that God has given you a gift, and when you've been given a gift, you realize that you don't take it for granted, and so that you have to have your A game every time you utilize His gift. And if not, then you're just taking it for granted. And a lot of people do that. A lot of people just wing it, and for me, I can't do that. So.
So, Father, you had 4 years at Helena College, or no? Am I wrong? 3.
I had 3 years. I did my undergraduate at the University of North Florida, so I had my undergraduate degree. Then I did my master's. I did 2 masters over at Holy Cross. One in divinity, which most priests will receive a master's of divinity. That's more of the pastoral type of degree within. And then and then I did a master's of theology, which is much more of an academic degree. And then from there, I went to Gordon Conwell and did a doctorate in counseling and doctorate of ministry and pastoral counseling.
Were the 2 masters simultaneous?
Yes, they were. It was not one of my finer choices in life. Definitely just was not, I mean, there's a lot of overlap in the courses, but there's still, I mean, you're taking, at Holy Cross, you're taking somewhere between the average master's level is 2 classes. 2, maybe 3 classes at most. At the seminary, you're taking 5 classes, and I was taking close to, I think, 7. So
wow. So Father, you're taking 2 masters. You finished them both after 3 years.
I finished the second master's after 4 years. Yeah. So one at 3, the other one at 4.
And previous to that, you did undergraduate work where?
At the University of North Florida.
Okay, so 4 years undergraduate work. Then essentially 4 years for a master's.
And then another 3 years of pastoral counseling.
I think, was that the Billy Graham?
Yes.
I feel something happened there, and I have no clue. But something about that seems like, so what happened in those 3 years?
I mean, I think that, the thing is that, we, for me, it was just learning a different way of sharing what I knew, because what I was studying, and just I was so impressed by the people that were teaching me, that the way that they would teach us how to articulate things in a very concrete way, but also even the whole structure of giving a message, the way that we should prepare in receiving that, and writing the message, how we should research it. I mean, priests right now, Bob, to be honest with you, most priests are so busy.
Yeah.
That oftentimes, the sermon gets the last, and you have to be, just like in anything that you do. I mean, if you want to do it right, you have to be in that mode. You have to be in that method. At least for 100%. Me, you know. And so
100%.
I can't just say, hey, let's just go, you know, get up and start writing or stand. I never was gifted with that. Some people do have that gift. They're just speaking from their heart in a way. I have to process. I'm a thinker, so I think about it from different perspectives, and I imagine, different people in my church sometimes. What would they say if I made this statement?
Yep.
What would speak to them in that audience, and what would speak to that person in that audience, and really kind of, taking that sermon so importantly, because as we talked about before, is we always say, you should live each day as if it's your last. Well, as we've talked about, is we should live it each day as if it's your parishioner's last. It's their last liturgy, their last sermon, their last, because at one point it's going to be for all of us our last something,
Yeah.
whether it be a liturgy sermon. And for that reason, we should make sure that we're giving it the very best. Is it perfect all the time? No. I mean, because it's not about us. It's just simple. We're just simply the vessel, the microphone, if you will, in giving that message to the people.
Yeah. One of the things I will do when I have a script that is done, which takes forever, takes me months and months, sometimes years before, I will wait until I'm having a bad day in a crummy mood, and then I'll read it.
Really?
And I'll see, because that's when most people are turning on TV or going to a movie. They want to go there and feel better about their life. They'll want to feel better. And if I can't change my mood when I read that script, if I'm still in a crummy mood after I read that script, then I'm not doing my job, because my job is to give you hope, to give you faith, to give you inspiration, to just get you feeling great about life. And if it's not doing that, if it can't, and thank God, I mean, I'm not the most prolific writer because of that fact that I just won't. I know some people write scripts in 3 days and stuff. I'll wait and think and think and think, because one thing I've learned, those movies for years, if not decades, will affect people. So you better get it right. Better do it the right way and do it thoroughly and completely as you can.
Exactly.
I think, Father, in knowing you, that last 3 years, I think that's what had a profound effect on me, because I'm trying to go, why is Father Lowe, I don't want to do different. Why is he coming out different than some of these? And I think that just the words you just said, they taught me how to do this, how to prepare for it. I don't think that's being done. And I think that's at Helena College at times, at Holy Cross. And I think that's a profound effect. And I know they just got a huge grant, so I know they're working on it, but I just had to share. That was my easy question for the day.
Oh,
sorry. So, and my hard question for the day is, Presbytera.
Oh gosh. Oh man. I was in I came back. I was in where was I at this past week? I was in Canton, Ohio. I was doing a retreat in Canton, and I came back late Saturday night. And Roxanne was telling me this is because we just haven't seen each other a lot over the last several weeks. And I said, I was telling her, I said, I am so sorry. She's like, that's it, no more retreats for the rest of the year. I'm like, there's no more retreats the rest of the year. So I'm too scared, Bob, to be quite honest with you, to ask her to do anything else. But no, I promise you, she'll be on the she'll be.
Well, I can't wait. And whenever it is, I tell her it's an easy one. I just want to talk how you guys met, the key to falling in love with somebody, because you and I share very, very similar experiences about how you fell in love with your wife, how I fell in love with how we met. And we both have great stories. I'm going to save it for that day, but tell her it'll be an easy one. And
I will really tell her. You won't give her the hard question.
No, you're not. It was the chosen question that got you.
Yes, exactly.
All right, brother. Hey, before we go, tell everyone, first of all, where you can, there's two things I want to say. One is, if you want the Lowe's, Presbytera and Father Lowe, to come to your parish or to your wherever you're having your event to speak, I highly recommend. I've heard them in person. Oh my good Lord, it's so wonderful. And then they also have a book called Renewing You, which is phenomenal. And I don't know if you have anything else in the works, Father, but tell people how they can get in touch with you, and then go to YouTube and watch all this stuff. It's great. But tell them how they can get in touch.
Yeah. So so you can our website has everything, and it's on the screen right now, thelowes.com. What you could do to help me, though, is I am really trying to increase our YouTube followers and you as an audience. And as you all know, the way the algorithm works with a lot of the social media is not only subscribing but liking content allows that information to kind of get more and more up, so that people that may not even be
Right.
people of faith, may not just be, maybe they're just searching, would have access to that kind of information. And I think this is one of the easiest things people can do to share our faith, especially with the availabilities of technology right now. So if you were to go to the Lowe's.com, if you go to the YouTube.com and simply put in the Lowe's in the search engine and just simply subscribe to receiving our sermons, that would be a great gift that you could help us out with, just so we can help to share Christ's light with the world. And then the book Renewing You, as Bob obviously Bob endorsed our book, but it's a book that we hope will benefit people. You can find that at the Lowe's.com. All that stuff is there.
His book, or their book, is a reflection of Father and Presbytera Roxanne. It's not fluff. If it really, when you read this, you just go, these are people who have, and it has such a beautiful mix of theology with common sense. I don't know what you want to call it, the way the mind thinks. And because it really is just written so beautifully, the blending of those two elements. You guys do it wonderfully. And it's so, I found it so many times laughing at things. Oh my God, that's exactly what, that's something that happened in my life. So I absolutely love the book Renewing You. And if you ever have anything new, Father, let us know.
There's something we're working on. Something hopefully in the new year we'll share that with everyone. But yeah, there is something coming soon. But we're not able really to share too much of it right now. But it's exciting stuff. I think something that would be that people, we hope and pray, would benefit, just like they did with Renewing You.
I have no doubt. All right, Brother Lowe. As always, it's great having you back. We'll hopefully see you next week.
Yes.
And hey, by the way, is this the last one on Daniel? Did I skip one?
No, we've got chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6. We've got several more weeks for sure.
Awesome. All right, brother. Look, great to have you back.
Right. Thank you. Thanks to all those that tuning in, and thank you, brother, for the invitation.
Right. God bless you, man.
All right, brother. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.